I am almost 62 and I still hear my mom's voice in my head, and she's still alive, so I talk to her daily. So I do hear her voice in my head, but I hear her say things like, if you can't say anything nice, then don't say anything at all, or be a good girl. And while some of these are easy to recognize that they're not things that I need to believe anymore or want to believe anymore, so some of them are kind of silly, but some of them actually are harmful if we continue to believe them, such as, if you can't say anything nice, then don't say anything at all. And that's what I want to talk about with you in this video, is what beliefs, what rules are we still living by that we were told, things that we were told when we were young. And I have a list of, I think, 10, and I'd love to know if there are any other ones that you believe that I don't list. There probably are a lot more than what I'm saying. And then I want to talk a little bit about how we can break free from these ones that we still believe. Like the one that I still very much hear it in my head. If you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all, which taught me to not speak up when somebody hurt me, to not tell them that they hurt me, because that wouldn't be nice. In my little sponge of a brain when I was young, I thought that saying that someone hurt me then would hurt them. So even in midlife, I still hear some of these rules. And again, I'm wondering if you do as well. And it drives me crazy sometimes, but I'm going to tell you why and how these things are staying in our head. I end up feeling like a kid again and having to follow the rules. Did you know that we have about 6,200 thoughts a day, which, if you calculate that in waking hours, is a new thought every 9 seconds. That's a lot of thoughts. And on top of that, 80% of our thoughts every day are negative. We are negatively biased. We go toward the negative. And this goes back to caveman, cavewoman days, which I talked about in another video, that we had to be on alert all the time for our own safety, for our own survival. And that hasn't left us much. So we still stay in the negative. Plus, we're programmed when we're young. No, don't do that. Don't touch that. That's not a good idea, right? We hear a lot of negative when we're young. And for most of us, we don't hear equal amounts of positive. So we get biased toward the negative. And again, about 80% of our thoughts are negative. 95% of our thoughts every day are repetitive. They're the same things that we thought yesterday and the day before. We don't have many new thoughts. So these things that we were told when we were kids, when we hear something enough times, it gets programmed in and we believe it to be true. Fast forward to adulthood, and we have a lot of negative thoughts in our head, a lot of patterns and rules that we were taught and conditioned to believe were true, such as, if you cross your eyes, they'll stay stuck that way, right? Now, that is a silly one that we know as adults is not true. But what about the ones that we grew up believing were actually the truth? So these rules basically became the software. If you consider that we are basically like a computer, and we get software installed, and these things that we were told when we were young become the software. And so unless we examine this software and download new software, we are running on by midlife, very 50, 60-year-old software that it's very old and antiquated. And if you think about, if you had a computer that was, equally as old as you are, and the software was the original software, like I used to use WordPerfect, I don't think that would run on a computer anymore. or it would be very slow and I wouldn't get the progress that I want. And that's what's happening in our lives, is we're running on this really old software unless we, again, have examined it. And that's what is running our lives, is this old, outdated software. So let's get a new software update. Okay, let's start with the first one, which I've already mentioned. If you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. This taught me to not speak up. And I was in 3 marriages, and I am divorced 3 times. And I know that saying, that rule that I was following, made me overlook things that I did not like, because I was taught if I couldn't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. So it taught me to not speak up, to not have a voice. And so I'm wondering, what about you? Were you criticized when you spoke up? Were you taught to, not talk back? Were you basically taught that you didn't have a voice, or maybe you were ignored when you brought things up, and so you learned to not speak up? I would love for you to comment about what you experienced in this area around this one. I already talked about this a little bit, but the next one is loyalty. I was taught that I was supposed to be loyal at all costs, basically. This caused me to get into 3 marriages that one of them I stayed in for 17 years after he had an affair in year 2. But because I didn't want to be divorced a second time, I stayed loyal. I thought that that was the thing to do. And the first time I remember really that I was, that this loyalty thing came about was I went to college for dental hygiene. I knew when I took my electives that I really wanted to switch to a different major, which was either psychology or nutrition. Both of those fascinated me, which now it doesn't surprise me that I am doing something that involves our brain and how we think and how we process and how we act as human beings. So had I not had the rule that we had to be loyal at all costs, I would have switched majors. But I had this fear that if I wasn't loyal, that I would disappoint someone. And that fear of disappointing someone was one of the biggest hurdles, if not the biggest people-pleasing hurdle that I had to get over, because it kept me from speaking up. And also it kept me loyal. It kept me in situations where I stayed way too long. And that brings me to the next rule, and that is to follow what brings you a stable income. Don't think about doing what you love. Think about what's going to bring you a stable income. Become independent and be able to live on your own. Do things for yourself. Don't ask for help. And that taught me to go into a career that I didn't love. And I actually ended up, after a few years of working in dental hygiene, I developed every weekend stomach aches on Sunday, thinking about having to go to work the next day. But I followed it again because of loyalty. I stayed in it, but it was not something that I loved, but it was stable. Put butter in my coffee, you. And this came from, I think, part of it was, how many times when you were young did you hear, stop daydreaming, get busy and do something? You couldn't say you were bored because that meant something was wrong. So you had to work hard and then continue that throughout your life. That was the expectation. That was the rule. I learned this. Lavender latte. It is so yummy. This is organic lavender syrup from Wabri, and it is really tasty. And you can't put butter in your coffee without blending it, otherwise you're just drinking a sludge of butter on the top of your coffee, and nobody wants to drink a sludge of butter. Okay, let's sit down and talk about the rest of these. Back to the one about working hard. I had a client tell me that she had this sudden realization that a belief, like a rule that she was told, was toiling and suffering make you a better person. So that told her, right, that she couldn't have fun in her life. It had to be about work. And if she wasn't working, if she wasn't suffering, that she wasn't going to be a better person, that made her an inferior person. That kind of goes along with the next one. Oh, that's so good. Lavender latte. Have you tried it? Let me know. The next one is, if you can't do something well, don't do it at all. And what does this teach us? This teaches us perfectionism. And I call myself a recovering, people-pleasing, procrastinating perfectionist. And that's where it comes from, is I was taught you have to do it basically perfectly, or don't do it at all. I had a friend tell me that she was taught specific is terrific. So if it wasn't perfect, it wasn't great. And these are the kind of messages we received, again, and they were programmed in. So they're basically like subliminal messages that we are living our life unless we have examined them and basically put in new software and reprogrammed. And this thought, if you can't do something well, then teaches us also, because we have a really difficult time of getting it perfect, then we end up procrastinating, right? Or we avoid it altogether. We don't even try because we fear failing. We get this fear of trying new things. On the opposite side of that, how many times were you told, don't brag about yourself, don't speak highly of yourself, don't be boastful, don't be so proud, right? Be humble, because if you speak highly of yourself, if you're proud of something that you do, you might make someone else feel bad. And I lived into that, right? I didn't speak about the things I was proud of. And I think we miss out on a lot of joy when we can't celebrate what we're proud of. And then we grow into adults who think we can't celebrate our accomplishments. And there's a difference between pushing it in someone's face and actually just celebrating, talking about it, and allowing your friends to celebrate with you. That also teaches the subconscious mind, oh, she likes that. Therefore, I'm going to bring her more things to celebrate. When I finish a video like this, there's a celebration. Having a cup of coffee in the afternoon is a celebration. I'm allowing myself to do it because the more I do it, the more I celebrate, the more the universe will bring me to celebrate. And yet, even though we're taught to not celebrate, not to be braggadocious and boastful, we're also taught, put on a happy face, turn that frown upside down, let everyone know that everything is fine in your life. And that breaks connection with people. When we cannot connect with them on an authentic level by sharing maybe something that we're struggling with, but we just have to put on a happy face and let the world know that everything's peachy. Again, it keeps us from connecting, because people like to connect with people who are authentic and vulnerable and aren't always putting on or wearing this facade, this mask of that everything's fine. And what about this one? Don't rock the boat. This teaches us to avoid conflict. Don't bring things up. It teaches us to be the peacekeepers. And so we're constantly smoothing over other people's emotions and situations. And allowing people to actually get away with things, enabling people by not addressing things that come up. We are enabling them to do it again. We are enabling them to stay not responsible for their behavior or their feelings or their words. Oh, something along with this that I was told when I was young was, nobody likes a tattletale. And so again, that along with, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all, taught me that I didn't have a voice, that I couldn't speak up when someone hurt me. Don't rock the boat. If you don't have anything nice to say, just stay quiet. So I learned to stuff it down and keep it in and not show my emotions, not speak up when someone hurt me. And that was very detrimental in my life. Okay, 2 more, and they kind of go hand in hand. I had a client tell me that she learned, probably in Sunday school, she doesn't remember specifically learning this lesson, but it's like ingrained in her head. It's like an engraved marker in her head. And it was God, others, self. And I first saw it as, when she said it, God, others, self, right? Written across horizontally. And then I recognized that she was saying God, others, self. So the self was at the bottom. And I believe in a higher power. So I'm not discounting that the higher power, God, whoever you want to call it, is at the top. And there is a higher consciousness that is out there. But I don't subscribe to us always being the low man on the totem pole. We're like the bottom of the pig pile, right? Did you ever play that game when you were young? Pig pile or dog pile. We called it pig pile. I don't know if that's a Midwest thing or a boomers thing, but we called it a pig pile. And it didn't feel good if you were literally on the bottom of the pile. It was suffocating to be down there, and you couldn't do anything, right? You couldn't move. And that's what happens when we think of this pyramid of God, others, self, and we're always at the bottom. We're immobilized in our life by that. And it keeps us stuck in this thinking that we always have to think and do for other people first before we can do for ourselves. And typically what happens is then there's nothing left for us when it comes time for ourselves. And also what happens, and this leads me to the 10th point, is we are so afraid of being judged as selfish. Don't be selfish. Stop being so selfish. And that pyramid leads us to believe also that when I do something for myself, because I'm the low man on the totem pole, that I'm being selfish. And it's just not true. That if I don't take care of myself, then I have nothing to give to other people. And I'm not talking about champagne and chocolate and bubble baths, right? I am talking about mental health. I am talking about speaking to myself in a kind way. I am talking about taking the time that I need to nourish my body and my soul and my spirit and my heart. Taking time to read and relax and do things that I enjoy. Just living into who I want to live into without having to always think of the other person first. Because if I can't think of myself first, then I'm not quite sure how I can serve other people when I'm worried about pleasing them. So there's 3 things that we can do to break free from some of these rules that we've been following. And it takes reprogramming basically that software that has been running the show for most of our lives. So the first thing you can do is use the litmus test. Is this rule true for everyone? Does it apply to all people and situations? Doing the litmus test helps you see that a lot of these rules that we were given
We're created for certain circumstances, but they aren't universal truths. They don't apply to everything or everybody. And realizing that it doesn't apply in all situations allows you to say, well, does this apply to me? Does it serve me in any way? An example of that would be, say you had a friend who was in a marriage that every time you saw her, she grumbled and complained and clearly was unhappy about the marriage. Maybe she is being emotionally abused, or that it's a toxic situation in some way. But even if she's just unhappy, then she says, but I can't leave because we've been together for so long, right? Would you tell her she needs to stay in that marriage when you know how unhappy she is because she needs to be loyal? Probably not. The second thing you can do is to start being mindful of when these things, when these voices pop into your head, like my mom's voice, be a good girl, and ask yourself, is this true? Do I need to follow this rule? Is there some benefit for me following this rule? Does it serve me in my life? And start becoming more mindful of how often these rules are popping up and are driving your life, that they're in the driver's seat. By staying present this way and aware of the thoughts that you're thinking, that 95% repetition, you can start interrupting, because these are just patterned thoughts. They are just habitual. They're habitual thoughts. And until we break that habit by having awareness of it and stopping it, it will continue. And that thought will continue to run your life. FYI, I am a board certified hypnotist, so I have studied the subconscious mind and how our unconscious works in our life and how it drives the show. It runs 95% of our day. And I have seen the power with myself of using hypnosis. It's a very simple, safe tool to use to reprogram some of these thoughts that are in there. I've used it with my clients, and I use it daily with myself to help rewire the thoughts that are just the software that's in the computer. If you're interested in talking about that, I offer a free call, and the link is down in the description of this video. I also have a free meditation audio that will help you reprogram some of these thoughts. So go grab that. It's also down in the description. It's free. The only thing it takes is, I think, 14 minutes of your day. And it's a very relaxing audio. It's my voice with some music to the background. So go grab that, and I would love to know what you think about it. And then the third thing that you can do is to reframe this rule or belief. For instance, instead of saying, if you can't do something well, then don't do it at all. Instead, reframe that and say, it's okay to learn and improve as I go, right? And it doesn't have to be perfect. And reframing these things helps us turn these rigid, old rules into empowering beliefs that, again, reprogram that software. We actually have neuroplasticity in our brain. So an old dog can learn new tricks. Our brain can learn new ways of thinking and new ways of being. We just have to tell it what we want it to do. It can't change on its own. So we have to do the work, the reprogramming, to get the new software in there. These old rules, when we play by them, many times make us feel guilty. So in the next video, we'll be talking about how to reframe guilt, and that guilt does not mean that you've done something wrong.
I am almost 62 and I still hear my mom's voice in my head. She's still alive, so ouch, that hurt. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to do this video and talk at the same time. Can an old dog learn new tricks?